Sir, don't move. You've been standing here too long. I need to know what you're doing.
I'm waiting for a train, officer. Standing in public isn't a crime.
Then give me your ID right now or this gets difficult.
You're recording, right? Because you're about to explain
On camera.
why you're detained.
The body camera footage from Officer Kyle Braden would eventually become mandatory viewing for every police cadet in the state, a stark lesson in how quickly a career can end when authority is unchecked by wisdom. But on that crisp, bright Tuesday morning, Officer Braden had absolutely no idea that the man he was eyeing from across the train platform was effectively his boss's boss's boss. He didn't know that the older black gentleman standing quietly by the ticket kiosk reading a folded Wall Street Journal was Dr. Marcus Thorne. He didn't know that Dr. Thorne had spent the last 30 years writing the very training manuals that sat unread in Braden's locker. He didn't know that Thorne was the executive director of the State Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training, the man whose signature was stamped on the bottom of Braden's own police certification. All Officer Braden saw was a black man in a trench coat standing still in a public place, and in Braden's limited experience that was enough to warrant an investigation. Dr. Thorne was enjoying the morning. At 62 years old, he appreciated the stillness of the platform before the commuter rush truly began. He was on his way to the state capitol to testify before a Senate committee regarding police funding allocation. He was dressed impeccably, as he always was, in a charcoal-tailored suit beneath a beige trench coat, a fedora resting lightly on his head, a nod to a bygone era of dignity that he refused to let go of. He checked his watch, a vintage Omega that had been his father's. The 9:15 express to the Capitol was due in 10 minutes. He adjusted his glasses and turned the page of his newspaper, scanning an article about municipal bond rates. He was a man who believed deeply in the system primarily because he had spent a lifetime trying to perfect it. He wasn't anti-police. He was the ultimate policeman's scholar. He believed in the nobility of the badge, but he held a zero-tolerance policy for those who tarnished it. He stood with the posture of a man who had nothing to hide and everything to give. Before we get into the details of this encounter that would shake the entire department to its foundation, I need you to do something for me. Pause for a second and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, your state, your city, or your country. And if you believe that respect is a two-way street, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We cover the stories that the mainstream media often overlooks, and trust me, you are going to want to see how this one ends. The sunlight was cutting sharp angles across the concrete platform. It was a beautiful day, the kind of day that usually precludes trouble. Thorne folded his newspaper and tucked it under his arm, taking a deep breath of the cool air. He noticed the patrol car parked in the access lane adjacent to the tracks. It was Unit 4 Alpha 2. He noted it automatically. Old habits from his days as a precinct commander never really faded. He saw the officer inside looking at him. Thorne didn't flinch. He didn't look away. He simply acknowledged the presence of law enforcement and went back to watching the horizon for his train. To Officer Kyle Braden, 27 years old and eager to make a name for himself as a proactive enforcer, Thorne's lack of reaction was interpreted as arrogance. Braden had been on the force for 4 years, just enough time to become confident, but not nearly enough time to become wise. He had a reputation in the precinct for high arrest numbers, mostly for nuisance crimes, loitering, failure to comply, disorderly conduct. His sergeant had warned him about hunting, but Braden viewed himself as a sheepdog. Today, however, he was about to bark at a lion. Braden put the cruiser in park and stepped out. He adjusted his utility belt, feeling the weight of the gun, the taser, and the handcuffs tools that gave him power, or so he thought. He adjusted his sunglasses and began the long walk across the platform toward the older man. Thorne watched him come out of the corner of his eye. He saw the stride. It wasn't the stride of a community servant coming to say hello. It was the stride of a predator closing the gap. Thorne mentally sighed. He had hoped for a peaceful trip, a coffee on the train, and a quiet review of his testimony. Instead, it seemed he was about to administer an impromptu oral exam on the Fourth Amendment. The sound of Officer Braden's boots crunching on the gravel near the platform edge was heavy and deliberate. He wanted his presence to be felt. This was a tactical approach, one designed to intimidate, to put the subject on the back foot before a word was even spoken. Dr. Thorne did not turn around immediately. He waited until the officer was within 10 feet, effectively respecting the personal space of both parties. "Morning," Braden said, though the tone wasn't a greeting. It was a challenge. Thorne turned slowly, offering a polite, practiced smile, the kind he used at budget hearings. "Good morning, officer." His voice was a rich baritone, steady and calm. "Can I help you with something?" Braden stopped, thumbs hooked into his vest, chest puffed out. "Just wondering what you're doing hanging around here. We've had reports of loitering in the area." Thorne adjusted his glasses. "I am waiting for the 9:15 train to the capital. I believe I have about 7 minutes remaining." "You've been standing in this spot for a while," Braden countered, looking Thorne up and down, his eyes lingering on the expensive trench coat as if it were a costume. "Ticket." "I have my ticket on my phone," Thorne said, keeping his hands visible but making no move to retrieve the device. "Let me see it," Braden commanded. Thorne paused. He knew the law better than the young man standing in front of him. He knew that in this state, and under the specific transit authority statutes, a passenger was not required to produce a ticket until they were in a fare-paid zone, or on the train itself. The platform was a public space. "Officer," Thorne said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming more professorial, "I am currently in a public area. I am not inside the turnstiles. I am not required to produce proof of payment until I board the train. Is there a specific reason you are detaining me?" Braden's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to pushback, certainly not from someone he had mentally categorized as a vagrant or a low-level criminal trying to look fancy. "I didn't say I was detaining you. I'm conducting an investigation. We've had thefts involving commuters, people casing the platform." "I see," Thorne said. "And what specific behavior have I exhibited that matches the profile of someone casing a platform? Was it reading the Wall Street Journal? Or perhaps checking my watch?" "You're being smart with me," Braden snapped, stepping closer, invading Thorne's personal space. "I am being precise, officer. There is a difference. To detain me, you need reasonable, articulable suspicion that I have committed, am committing, or am about to commit a crime. Terry versus Ohio. You are currently engaged in a consensual encounter, which means I am free to decline your requests. Am I free to go?" The reference to Terry versus Ohio should have been a warning bell. It should have told Braden that this was not a normal tourist or commuter. But Braden's ego was already in the driver's seat, speeding toward a cliff. "You're not going anywhere until I know who you are," Braden said, his hand drifting instinctively near his cuffs. "I need to see ID." "I am declining that request," Thorne said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't step back. He stood his ground like a statue. "I have broken no laws. I am a citizen waiting for public transit. Your demand for identification is unlawful under the state's failure to identify statutes, which require a lawful arrest or valid detention first. Listen, pal." Braden stepped in, his voice rising, attracting the attention of a few other commuters who had just arrived. "You can do this the easy way or the hard way. I'm asking for ID. If you don't provide it, I'm going to take you in for obstruction. Obstruction requires a physical act that hinders your duties," Thorne corrected him almost gently. "Refusing an unlawful order is not obstruction. It is the exercise of my civil rights. Rights, I might add, that you swore an oath to uphold." Braden's face flushed red. He felt the eyes of the other commuters on him. A woman in a nurse's uniform had stopped about 20 feet away and was holding up her phone. She was recording. Thorne saw her and gave a barely perceptible nod. Last chance, Braden growled. ID now. Officer, Thorne said, looking him dead in the eye. I am going to ask you to pause and reflect on your training. Think about the contact and cover protocols. Think about the escalation matrix. You are skipping steps. You are moving from a consensual encounter to a seizure without probable cause. I am giving you an opportunity to walk away and let me catch my train. You don't tell me my job, Braden shouted. Someone needs to, Thorne replied calmly. The tension on the platform was palpable, a physical weight in the air. The bright morning sun seemed to spotlight the confrontation, stripping away any nuance. Officer Braden was committed now. He had drawn a line in the sand in front of an audience, and his pride would not allow him to retreat. He saw Thorne's calmness not as compliance but as defiance, a threat to his control. Turn around, Braden barked, unhooking his handcuffs from his belt. The metallic rattle of the cuffs was loud in the quiet station. For what crime? Thorne asked. He didn't move. He kept his hands in front of him, clasped loosely over his newspaper. I am asking you to articulate the crime. Disorderly conduct and failure to identify. Braden recited, grabbing Thorne's arm and spinning him around. The force was unnecessary and aggressive. Thorne did not resist the physical motion, but he did not help it either. He allowed his arm to be manipulated, his body turning with the fluid grace of a man who knew that any physical resistance would be used to justify violence. I am not resisting, Thorne announced clearly, his voice projecting for the camera the nurse was holding. I am complying with your physical commands under duress. However, I want it noted that failure to identify is a secondary charge. You have yet to establish the primary crime that necessitates identification. Shut up, Braden hissed in his ear as he slapped the cold steel cuff onto Thorne's right wrist. He yanked the arm back, twisting the shoulder joint painfully. Thorne grimaced but did not cry out. Officer, check the tightness. You are applying them too tightly. That is a violation of Department Policy 402 Section B. I said, shut up. Braden cranked the second cuff onto the left wrist. You want to play lawyer? You can do it in the holding cell. I am not a lawyer, Thorne said quietly as he was shoved toward the patrol car. I am the man who wrote the policy you are currently violating. Braden laughed, a short, derisive bark. Yeah, sure. And I'm the police commissioner. Keep walking. The nurse with the phone called out, Officer, he wasn't doing anything. We all saw it. He was just standing there. Braden whipped his head around. Back up, ma'am, or you'll be joining him for interference. Thorne shook his head slightly. Focus on me, officer. Do not threaten witnesses. That creates a liability for the city. You just don't stop, do you? Braden shoved Thorne against the side of the patrol car. He patted him down roughly, reaching into the trench coat pockets. He pulled out the wallet. There it is, Braden said, smirking. Was that so hard? You are conducting an illegal search incident to an unlawful arrest, Thorne stated. Everything you find is fruit of the poisonous tree. It will be inadmissible. Braden ignored him, tossing the wallet onto the dashboard of the car without opening it. He opened the rear door. Get in. Thorne maneuvered himself into the cramped back seat of the Interceptor. The hard plastic seat was unforgiving. The cage separated him from the front, a barrier of wire mesh and plexiglass designed to make occupants feel like animals. Thorne sat upright, maintaining his dignity even in handcuffs. He took a deep breath, centering himself. He was already composing the memorandum in his head. This wasn't just a bad stop. It was a systemic failure. It was evidence that the training curriculum he had designed was not reaching the street level, or it was being ignored by officers like Braden, who lacked the temperament for the job. Braden slammed the door shut, sealing Thorne inside. The officer walked around to the driver's side, hiking up his belt, looking around the platform with a look of triumph. He felt he had cleaned up the streets. He had taken down a smart-mouth loiterer. He got into the driver's seat and started the engine. "You comfortable back there?" Braden asked, eyeing Thorne in the rearview mirror. "Comfort is irrelevant," Thorne replied. "Competence is what concerns me." Braden gunned the engine and peeled out of the station lot, failing to use his turn signal as he merged onto the main road. "Failure to signal," Thorne murmured to himself. "Another violation." Have you ever been in a situation where you knew you were right but the person in power wouldn't listen? It's a helpless feeling for most. But for Dr. Marcus Thorne, it wasn't helplessness. It was patience. He knew something Officer Braden didn't. He knew that the destination of this car ride wasn't just a jail cell. It was the end of Officer Braden's career. The drive to the precinct took 15 minutes. For the entirety of the ride, Officer Braden played loud rock music, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel, completely oblivious to the gravity of the situation. He was high on adrenaline. He pulled out his radio mic. "Dispatch 4 Alpha 2, coming in with one male in custody. Disorderly failure to ID resisting." Thorne listened from the back. Resisting, he thought. He's adding charges to cover his tracks. It was a common tactic, one that Thorne had spent years trying to eradicate through policy reform. It was called padding the jacket. If you charge a man with enough things, the hope is that he will plead out to the lesser charge just to go home, and the officer avoids a lawsuit. 10-4 Alpha-2, the dispatcher crackled back. Braden glanced in the mirror again. "You got quiet back there. Finally realized you're in trouble." Thorne met his eyes in the reflection. "I am conserving my energy, officer. I have a feeling I will be doing a lot of talking shortly." "Yeah, to the judge," Braden scoffed. "Eventually, perhaps. But first, to your watch commander." They pulled into the sallyport of the precinct. The heavy metal doors rolled down behind them, plunging the garage into artificial twilight. Braden hauled Thorne out of the car. Thorne's shoulders ached, but he stood tall. He walked where he was directed through the heavy security doors and into the processing area. The station smelled of stale coffee, floor wax, and anxiety. It was a smell Thorne knew well. He had spent the first 20 years of his career working in buildings just like this one. He knew the rhythm of the place. He knew the sound of the teletype, the squawk of the radios, the murmured conversations of detectives in the squad room. Braden marched him up to the booking desk. Behind the high counter sat Sergeant Tom Miller. Miller was a fixture in the department, 58 years old, gray-haired with a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite. He was eating a turkey sandwich and reading a report. He looked up as Braden approached. "What you got, Kyle?" Miller asked, his voice gravelly and tired. "Refusal to ID loitering at the train station disorderly," Braden said, puffing his chest out. "Guy wanted to debate the Constitution on the platform. Caused a scene." Miller looked at Thorne. He saw the expensive suit. He saw the demeanor. He saw the trench coat. He frowned. This didn't look like a loiterer. "Name?" Miller asked Thorne. "He wouldn't give it," Braden interrupted. "That's why he's here." Thorne looked at the sergeant. "My name is Dr. Marcus Thorne. My wallet is in Officer Braden's pocket. I suggest you retrieve it and look at the identification inside." Miller paused. The name sounded familiar. It rang a bell in the back of his mind, something from the mandatory yearly updates. "Give me the wallet, Braden," Miller said, extending a hand. "Sarge, he's just stalling." Braden complained, digging the wallet out. "He's a nobody." Miller snatched the wallet. He opened it. The first thing he saw was the driver's license. Marcus Thorne. Then he flipped the flap. Behind the clear plastic window wasn't just a standard ID. It was a gold-colored metal card with the state seal embossed on it. It read Executive Director, State Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training. Beneath that, in bold red letters, all agencies shall render courtesy and assistance. Miller froze. He stopped chewing his sandwich. He looked at the card. He looked at Thorne. He looked at the card again. His face went pale, draining of all color. He knew exactly who Marcus Thorne was. This was the man who signed the audit checks. This was the man who decided if their department kept its accreditation. This was the man who oversaw the certification of every single officer in the state. Miller slowly closed the wallet. He looked up at Braden, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and horror. "Kyle," Miller whispered, his voice trembling slightly. "Do you know who this is?" "Some guy who wouldn't show ID." Braden shrugged, oblivious. Miller stood up. He walked around the desk. He didn't look at Braden. He walked straight to Thorne. "Unlock these cuffs. Now," Miller ordered Braden. "What, Sarge, he's a—" "I said unlock the damn cuffs, Braden!" Miller roared, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. The entire booking room went silent. Other officers stopped what they were doing and looked over. Braden, confused and startled, fumbled for his key. He unlocked the cuffs. Thorne rubbed his wrists, his expression unreadable. Miller turned to Thorne. "Dr. Thorne, sir, I am incredibly sorry. I don't know what to say." Thorne looked at Miller, then at Braden. "You can start by calling Captain Reynolds, immediately." The silence in the precinct was deafening. It wasn't the quiet of peace. It was the quiet of a bomb that had just landed in the room but hadn't detonated yet. Officer Braden stood holding his handcuffs, looking back and forth between his sergeant and the man he had just arrested. He still didn't quite understand. "Sarge, what is going on?" Braden asked, his voice whining. "He's a suspect." Sergeant Miller turned on him, his face purple with rage. "Shut your mouth, Braden. Go sit in the break room. Do not speak to anyone. Do not touch your radio. Do not touch your Bodycam. Just sit there." "But—" "Go!" Miller screamed. Braden slinked away, looking over his shoulder, confused and angry. He felt betrayed. He felt like the victim. Miller turned back to Thorne. "Sir, please. Come into the office. Can I get you water, coffee?" "I don't want coffee, Sergeant," Thorne said, his voice ice cold. "I want to know how an officer with that lack of judgment made it through the academy. I want to know why he is patrolling a transit hub with zero understanding of Fourth Amendment case law." I don't have an answer for that, sir," Miller stammered. He picked up the phone and dialed the captain's direct line. "Captain, it's Miller. You need to come down here, now. It's a Code 99 situation. Nobody is shot. It's worse. Braden just arrested the executive director of post." While they waited for the captain, Thorne sat in a chair in the booking area. He refused to go to a private office. He wanted to remain in the public view of the station. He took out a small notebook from his pocket and began writing. He was documenting everything: the time, the location, the comments made, the procedures followed and ignored. 10 minutes later, Captain Reynolds burst through the doors. He was a tall man, usually composed, but right now he looked like he had run a marathon. He was tucking his shirt in, sweat beading on his forehead. He saw Thorne sitting there, rubbing his chafed wrists. Reynolds closed his eyes for a second, a silent prayer that this was a nightmare. He walked over, hand extended. "Dr. Thorne," Reynolds said, his voice breathless. "I am Captain Reynolds. I am mortified." Thorne stood up. He didn't shake the hand. "Captain, your officer detained me without reasonable suspicion. He arrested me for asserting my rights. He used excessive force in the application of restraints. He threatened a witness, and he drove dangerously with a prisoner in custody." "He will be dealt with, sir," Reynolds promised. "We will launch an immediate internal investigation." "No," Thorne said. "You won't just launch an investigation. I am launching a decertification review. Today. I want his body camera footage downloaded and secured on a separate hard drive before I leave this building. I want the dash cam footage. I want the logs." "Of course," Reynolds said. "Whatever you need." "And I want to see him," Thorne said. "Sir, bring Officer Braden out here. I want him to understand exactly what he has done." Reynolds nodded to Miller. "Get him." Miller went to the break room and returned with Braden. The young officer looked sullen, arms crossed. He still thought this was a misunderstanding that would blow over. He didn't realize his life as he knew it was over. "Officer Braden," Thorne said. He didn't yell. He spoke with the quiet authority of a man who could end careers with a pen stroke. "Do you know what the post commission does?" They do the training," Braden mumbled. "We set the standards," Thorne corrected. "We grant the license that allows you to carry a badge and a gun. It is a privilege, not a right. And today you proved you do not possess the judgment, the temperament, or the legal knowledge to hold that privilege." "I was just doing my job," Braden insisted. "You were acting suspicious." "Standing while black is not suspicious, officer," Thorne said. The words hung in the air. "And neither is reading a newspaper. Your inability to distinguish between a citizen exercising their rights and a criminal hiding their guilt is a fatal flaw in your character." The confrontation in the precinct booking area was the turning point. Braden's defiance began to crack as he looked around the room. He saw the fear in his captain's eyes. He saw the disgust on Sergeant Miller's face. For the first time, the reality of his situation began to pierce his armor of arrogance. "You're going to fire me?" Braden asked, his voice small. "I cannot fire you," Thorne said. "That is up to your department. But I can ensure that you never work as a police officer in this state or any state with reciprocity ever again. I am flagging your certification for immediate suspension pending review." Braden looked at Captain Reynolds, looking for a lifeline. "Cap," Reynolds shook his head. "Turn in your badge and gun Kyle. You're on administrative leave effective immediately." The sound of the gun being placed on the counter was heavy. Then the badge. Braden looked naked without them. He looked like exactly what he was, a young man who had made a terrible mistake because he refused to listen. Thorne didn't stay long after that. He secured the copies of the footage. He took the names of everyone present. He refused a ride home from the police. He called an Uber. He walked out of the station with his head high, but his heart was heavy. He took no joy in this. He had dedicated his life to building up the police force, to making it professional and honorable. Seeing an officer like Braden was a reminder of how much work was left to do. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The video from the nurse at the train station went viral before Thorne even got home. The title was, "Cop Arrests Innocent Man for Reading Newspaper." It had 2 million views by dinner time. The comments section was on fire. People were outraged. But the real bombshell dropped the next day when the department released the body camera footage. Thorne had insisted on transparency. The footage showed everything: Braden's aggressive approach, Thorne's calm and legal responses, and the unlawful arrest. It was a textbook example of bad policing. Dr. Thorne didn't just sit back. He filed a formal complaint, not for money, but for record. He wanted it documented. The internal affairs investigation was concluded in record time, 2 weeks. The findings were sustained on all counts: unlawful detention, unlawful arrest, excessive force conduct, unbecoming. Braden was fired, but Thorne kept his word. He convened a special hearing of the Post Commission. Braden was called to testify. He tried to argue that he was following his gut. The commission didn't buy it. They voted unanimously to revoke his peace officer certification permanently. But the investigation didn't stop at Braden. Thorne ordered an audit of the entire precinct's stop and frisk data. What they found was a pattern. Braden wasn't alone. He was just the most egregious. The audit revealed that minority commuters were stopped at that train station at a rate 4 times higher than white commuters, despite no difference in contraband findings. This wasn't just about one bad apple. It was about the barrel. The city settled with Dr. Thorne 3 months later. They knew they had no defense. The settlement was for $450,000. It was a significant amount of money tax-free. Dr. Thorne stood on the steps of the courthouse, a check in his hand. The media was there. Microphones were shoved in his face. Reporters shouted questions. "Dr. Thorne, are you happy with the outcome? Dr. Thorne, do you hate the police?" Thorne raised a hand for silence. He looked into the cameras. He looked tired but resolved. "I do not hate the police," Thorne said. "I love the law, and because I love the law, I cannot stand by when it is abused by those sworn to protect it. This money," he held up the check. "This money is not a lottery win. It is a penalty. It is the price the taxpayers are paying for a failure of leadership." He paused. "I am donating the entirety of this settlement to the Public Defender's Office, specifically to a fund for those who are wrongfully accused but cannot afford bail. Because for every Marcus Thorne who knows his rights and has a gold card in his wallet, there are 1,000 young men who have nothing who get arrested, plead guilty just to go home and have their lives ruined." The crowd went silent. "Officer Braden lost his job," Thorne continued. "That is tragic for him. But the men he wrongfully arrested in the past lost their jobs, their housing, and their dignity. That is the real tragedy." The impact of the Thorne incident, as it came to be known, was profound. The state legislature passed a new bill named after him, requiring mandatory de-escalation training every 6 months for all officers. It required that officers articulate the specific crime they were investigating before demanding ID. It changed the law. Captain Reynolds was forced into early retirement. The precinct was reorganized. New leadership was brought in, leaders who understood that respect was earned, not demanded. As for Kyle Braden, he left the state. Last anyone heard, he was working construction in Nevada. He gave one interview to a podcast claiming he was a victim of cancel culture. But nobody really listened. The video spoke for itself. Dr. Thorne eventually retired from the commission, but he didn't stop working. He spent his remaining years traveling to police academies, teaching a class on the Constitution as a shield. He would play the video of his own arrest. He would point out every mistake. He would tell the cadets, "Don't be this guy. Be the officer who protects the man reading the newspaper." The train station where it happened is still there. The sun still shines on the platform. The commuters still wait for the 9:15 express. But things are different now. The officers who patrol that beat walk differently. They wave. They talk to people. They don't hunt. Dr. Thorne's story matters because it stripped away the excuses. It showed that it doesn't matter how well you dress, how well you speak, or how high your rank is, bias can still find you. But it also showed that if you stand your ground, if you know your rights, and if you have the courage to remain calm in the face of aggression, you can fight back. We like to think that justice is blind, but we know it isn't. It peeks. It makes assumptions. It judges books by their covers. It took a man who wrote the book on policing to remind the police of that fact. So here is the question I want to leave you with today. If you were in Dr. Thorne's shoes, if you were standing on that platform knowing you were innocent, but knowing the officer had a gun and the power to ruin your day, would you have stood your ground? Or would you have shown your ID just to make it go away? There is no wrong answer, really. Survival is a valid choice. But Dr. Thorne chose something harder than survival. He chose accountability. And because he did, the system is just a little bit better today than it was yesterday. Thanks for watching this story all the way to the end. It's stories like these that remind us why we need to keep the cameras rolling and keep asking the hard questions. If this story moved you, if it made you think, please share it. Send it to a friend. Post it on your timeline, because the more people know their rights, the safer we all are. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. We have more stories coming that expose the truth and demand justice. Until next time, stay safe, know your rights, and take care of each other.